traditional outfit. And we have Wade. Morning, Wade.
Morning, Ayo. Morning, Valentine. Good
Good
morning,
morning.
Lagos.
Good to see you, for the first time in 2020 here. Thank you very much for coming. You can find Wade at Reink Nigeria. You can find Tunde at Big Coops on Twitter. You can find us at Smooth 981 FM using the hashtag Freshly Pressed 981.
You can send us messages on WhatsApp 0809 444 That is our WhatsApp number. Send the messages on Twitter with the hashtag FreshlyPress981.
All right, let's move on to our first story for today. First headline here, Wade, is Nigerians spent 7 billion naira on movies in cinemas in 2019. I think it's fitting that your first story for the year is looking back at 2019 and how the movie industry performed. I'll allow you to take us through the figures, please.
Um, this for me, this is good news, especially for Nigerians. The movie industry, I think, did well. Um, spent Nigerians spent about 7 billion, sorry,
Billion.
in watching movies. I think this is one sector of the economy that is still trying to provide some form of decent living for Nigerians.
Yes.
Aside from those who work in the movie industry itself, the people who ply their trades, those who sell the drinks, the popcorns, and quite a number of other things. Um, it also goes to show the that despite all the difficulties we've experienced or we experienced in 2019, Nigerians are still looking forward to some form of relaxation
Yes.
by entertaining themselves and trying to manage the stress levels and the levels of economic difficulties that they've experienced or
Mm-hmm.
they experience every day. Things like traffic, and for me, it's also um, a good source of health therapy,
Yes.
which would help calm your nerves rather than being in traffic for 3 4 hours. You can relax and get home in peace without going through all that.
But in
All
terms
right.
of economic value,
Yes.
how does this affect the nation?
In addition to that, I was going to ask a question around that because over the weekend we had one of the biggest movies of December, January, put on hold by the regulator, stating that due to some issues, and a number of people who argued for this talked about the fact that Nollywood has worked so hard without a lot of government intervention or fund to build themselves to where they are today. I mean, look at 7 billion naira in terms of economic terms is huge. It's a huge contribution to the economy. When you talk about government support, to what extent have they supported or are they helping this industry grow to be like Hollywood, which is a huge revenue for
Well,
America?
I think the first time government even tried to help or assist Nollywood was a few years back when they put in about, I think about 200 billion. But the fact remains that the movie industry or the entertainment industry itself has to create its own life, which is what it has done
Mm.
over the years. Cinemas had died down in Nigeria until late early 2000s, and when it was resuscitated, and today I see film houses springing up everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I was speaking to my cousin who lives in Ilorin and was complaining that movies are expensive in Lagos. Outside Lagos, people are able to see films for 500 700 naira, and these are all part of that help boost the general economy of the nation.
I would also add that the creative industry financing
Hmm.
initiative is also boosting because if you check out the sci-fi policy that was signed with the Bankers Committee instituted by the CBN, it's providing loans for movie distribution and creation production in a large sense. So
And
that should
that
also
that,
add to
that,
that.
that also has added to it. Also, when the support from the Bank of Industry. I'm sorry,
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying this. I'm not trying to um,
No, that's
advertise
fine.
for them. Has been a huge impact in the movie industry, providing loans for facilities, for marketing, and a huge number of a variety of different things. And this has really helped the economy. Like I said, it's good news. Why?
Yeah.
Because aside from those just in the movie industry, the attachments to the movie industries are
Mm-hmm.
able to market and sell their products, and for me it provides good living for Nigerians as a whole.
All right, thank you very much. Just to note that in December of 2019 alone, they generated 1
1
billion
billion,
naira.
which is fantastic.
All right, thank you. Cheta, I'll come to you for the next story. Another Nigerian student denied university admission after scoring 300 in the university tertiary, Unified Tertiary Matriculation Examination. His name is Firdaus Yusuf Awari and was unable to gain admission into the University of Ilorin, where she had hoped to study common law, according to this Premium Times report. Please take us through this report.
Um, it's just the sadly usual story of how Nigeria looks a gift horse in the mouth and decides to turn in the other direction. Firdaus Yusuf Awari scored 300 in JAMB, which in my time would have placed her at the top of the very top
True.
in JAMB, because if I memory serves me, the time I wrote JAMB, the highest in the country was 284. And back then, once you got such a score, you pretty much got any university of your choice,
Yes.
whatever course you wanted to do. In this report, further down, they compared it with the case of Goodness Thomas from Niger State. I had tweeted about that before the end of the year, who scored 302 and yet failed to get admission to study medicine in the Ahmadu Bello University. Now, the difference between this, and it's for me, it's a slight difference. The difference between Fidao's case and Goodness's case is that Fidao's case was a result of incompetence by WAEC. They did not release her WAEC result, which is a requirement to get admission, until 5 days after the JAMB portal had shut down. So she was unable to upload the results to the JAMB portal. Having said that, the fact is that, or the way I look at it is, in a lot of other places that some of us like to refer to as sinner climbs nowadays, when somebody has a track record of good performance in academics, good performance in sports, good performance in anything, universities will bend over backwards to ensure that we get this person, because it boosts the university's profile, it boosts the quality of the university. But here we'll start playing. So let's go back to Goodness Thomas. That was a case of quota system. What kind of nonsense are we? You see, the problem with this country, Nigeria has many problems. So one of the problems with this country is this our enthronement of mediocrity. How can you tell me somebody's got 302 and because of a quota you cannot admit the person, whereas you will admit people who scored 100? Thank you. And so we have this thing, this abnormality that we have enthroned as permanent. Since 1973, we have been practicing something called educationally disadvantaged states. Now, none of us in this room was born in 1973. As in 1970.
No, go on.
Ipadomo. 1973 was almost 50 years ago.
Yeah.
As in, and we haven't made progress from that point. So that quota system that we have entrenched in this as part of normality in our system, it's actually putting us back.
Okay.
Instead of, and the beauty of this, because let's call it spade a spade, most of the educational insurance, all of the educational disadvantaged states are enough. These two girls here are specimens of what educational disadvantage was meant to solve. They are both from the former northern region.
Yeah.
They are both female.
Yeah.
And they are both scoring very high in JAMB. So why can't they get in?
Yeah.
Why can't this is a good example of where the states or the schools should bend over, triple backwards to make sure that they get in.
Okay.
I have a question. So when I went through the story, I saw a report where to this particular case that the reason why she wasn't admitted, one was given that, because she didn't pass mathematics in the exam.
She passed mathematics. Really, she
So
passed, but it was not released on time.
Yes, okay. I wanted to go to
her results was released 5 days after the portal had closed.
Okay, so
I talked about that.
Therein lies my question. Now, portal. When you say portal has closed, is it a matter of time? Say you have a deadline to admit students, the portal system, like you said.
That's why I made the distinction. Goodness Thomas's case was quota system. Fidaro's case was the portal closed. Now, which is why I use the word incompetence of WAEC.
Yes,
because
that's what
WAEC has a time. It's supposed to be a systemic thing. You write your WAEC, results come out at a particular time, you upload. So somebody messed up and
Yes.
they didn't release a result on time. It was released 5 days after the portal was closed.
Thank
But
you.
my argument is that because of her high performance, they can actually, this is one of those exceptional cases where you can bend the system.
Yes. They can
Especially when
waive
it's
it
not
for
Just,
her.
just one last thing. I don't think it's about bending the system. There's what you
Breaking
call,
the system then.
there's what you call provisional admission, and the reasons why people give you provisional admissions is for you to be able to get things like your WAEC results.
Get things sorted.
Yeah.
And so this is what should have happened.
Mm.
I give you a provisional admission pending when WAEC releases that result. And if they don't release the result, then you can defer the admission to the next year.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Adi.
Let's go to the next story. Today, from the Guardian newspaper, Senate to make access to food fundamental human rights. It's a bill that I would hope would pass speedily, but how do you think this is going to play out?
How I think it will play out.
And what it contains, really?
I'm thinking more closely on the impact. It's something that we will see from a bill, because I mean, really, people eat words or they eat paper, right? Beyond passing a bill, underlying issues that have led to food security, food insecurity need to be addressed. Now, the bill does seek to achieve some interesting things in its wording. It says, it wants the government to, as part of the Constitution, these are insertions in the Constitution, direct its policy towards ensuring that the means of production, conservation, and distribution of foods are upgraded on a continuous basis. As such, I mean, that's down to our roots, for instance, as well. Remember, a large portion of food produced, I mean, there's some parts of the country you go to that you find food produced rotting because we can't transport them down to the areas for them to be consumed. That therefore means that's roads, that's rail. These are things that we've struggled with maybe since independence to even resolve, right? So there's the far-reaching implications, so many things. It talks about strategies, it mentions adequate, wording like adequate measure. It's good, right? But this is coming from the lawmaker that oversees the Committee on Agriculture and Food Security. Things that things that will have immediate impact, so that people, half the nation doesn't continue to wallow in the extreme poverties. By UN reports, I think we have over 50% of our population lives in extreme poverty, less than $1.90 a day, right? So things, immediate, short-term things, it needs to be taken as almost like a national emergency.
Yes.
The degree to which we have people living in extreme, poverty and hunger and don't have access to food, right? So things focus on things that go into the budget, for instance, right? And seeing that these infrastructure and or a bunch of things are done, right? So passing the bill is useful. But a lot of more immediate short-term things that need to be done. Access to funds, for instance, is important. Central bank has specific, schemes and programs to see that funding gets to the agricultural sector. But what has been the performance? Do those funds actually trickle down to the farmers? Right. Post-production, we produce a lot of things here, only to ship them out for finishing. Meanwhile, you can multiply the value of the cost of cocoa beans, and even just blending the cocoa is humongous, right? There's several factors. What about putting things in place that allow us to do some processing of this produce, which will then increase the value that we can get from them as well. So there's so much that can be done.
Possibly export chocolate. Thank you very much for that.
So much.
And they mentioned things like safe drinking water, primary healthcare, and environmental hygiene as going hand in glove with this. Dami says on WhatsApp, please add your names to your messages. It says this is just a bill for bill's sake. How have we fared in enforcing current fundamental human rights? Zikolo says, I think it's important that WAEC and JAM work together to ensure that results are released before the portal is closed. Also, I thought one can be given a provincial admission, which affords you an opportunity to get a complete result within a year. Lukman from Bagada says that the strange policies of quota systems, catchment areas, and educationally disadvantaged states have come home to roost. We have long jettisoned excellence and merit for politics. We cannot go anywhere without merit. This is the reason we have the kind of leaders we have today. The very worst of us are the ones in charge of the public sector, hence the reason why nothing works.
Right, thank you very much for your comments. Let's go on to our next story. Cheta, use of private jet by Buhari's daughter, what the law states. So over the weekend, there was an uproar over findings that the president's daughter, Aisha Buhari, had
Hanan,
used, pardon?
Hanan Buhari.
Hanan Buhari, thank you, had used the presidential jet to Bauchi in a study tour of Bauchi Emirates as part of her fieldwork for her ongoing master's program in photography at a UK university. Now, pardon?
How tame?
How
How tame?
How tame? All right, please go ahead.
They organized the tour specifically for her to come and snap photo. You didn't get that part of the story. Anyway, this story is just basically trying to tell us that there's nothing in the law that says that she cannot use the presidential jets. And my response to that would be, of course, there's nothing in the law because such a situation is unanticipated by law, by law drafters. Should there be anything in the law that says that the president must service his wife in Sausa room? No. So there are things that it gets to the level of ridiculousness to put them in the law. So maybe two quick stories.
Okay.
In 1956, the premier of the northern region, Ahmadu Bello, was going to Sokoto on a private visit, and he took one of the region's official jets, planes, for the visit. He flew from Kaduna, which was the capital of the northern region, to Sokoto for a private visit. The moment he returns to Kaduna, the administrative officer in charge of protocols in the northern region at the time promptly issued him an invoice for his use of the private plane. The next day, Ahmadu Bello reimbursed the regional government with the full sum of the invoice. Exactly 40 years later, the son of the maximum ruler of Nigeria, Sani Abacha, Ibrahim, and some of his friends wanted to buy suya, and they were in Lagos, and they decided that the quality of suya in Lagos was not good enough. They entered the commandeered one of the presidential jets and went to Kano, and unfortunately, the plane crashed just before they landed. Everybody died. Difference between a democracy and a maximum dictatorship. In a democracy, in a normal democracy, which is what we were up until 1966, I'll pick some distortions here and there, the premier, the chief executive of the region, we're not talking of his wives or his children, the man himself took the official plane for a private visit. As he came back, they gave an invoice. I'll tell a third story. When I was living in the UK, there was a time that Tony Blair went on a visit to the US, and then he came back to the UK, and he was driving back. Prime Minister of the UK has a two-car convoy. Yeah. His convoy was driving back from Heathrow to number 10, and there was traffic, and his driver decided to enter the post lane. Do you know that the Prime Minister of the UK was fined for that incident?
Yes. Yeah, of course.
That's normality. But here, the daughter of the president, we don't know who she is. She's a student. Not only did she take the presidential jet for a private photography tour, a whole state organized a durbar for her specifically. What were they celebrating? There was no celebration, but they organized a durbar. That's abuse of power. Yes, any way you look at it.
Let me ask you a question, and I wondered why a number of people seem to be shocked or surprised at this. We've seen a number of times the abuse of power, not just in this administration, but previous administration. What is
a number
solution?
of people are shocked and surprised at this because this president, when he was campaigning for the position, he talked about his personal integrity. He talked about the fact that the presidential air fleet was too large and that a lot of them would be sold. He talked about that because of his personal integrity, he will declare his asset. He's not done any of this. So essentially, the president and his people lied to us. End of story.
Thank you.
Commercial banks are preparing ahead of a possible announcement of a new recapitalization plan by the Central Bank of Nigeria this year. And this is a story as published on this day newspaper. What are your thoughts, seeing that some banks seem to be mulling this idea, say they love it, apparently, from the respondents that they interviewed for this story, saying that the 25 billion naira minimum capital requirement is something they can reach. Your thoughts?
This this is great news for the banking sector and the financial sector as a whole if they can put this together. Because at the end of the day, it would give them more muscle to do the kind of transactions that you require to do in Nigeria. A good case study for what has put the banks in a lot of the positions that they find themselves is their investment in the power sector in 2013. A lot of the banks are overexposed to the power sector, and it has culminated in yeah they are in a situation whereby a lot of the loans in from a lot of the foreign loans in the power sector at a point in time caused a lot of problems in terms of foreign currency access to banks, and they are only just getting through a lot of all this now. So by increasing your capitalization, it gives you funds to be able to invest in huge infrastructure development, which is what the government is planning over the next 3.5 years. Things like roads, like the road projects, rather than borrow externally, you can borrow internally because the banks would have the capacity to do that. But a lot of the banks are not looking at their main capital base, which is equity and share, and their retained earnings. They're looking at their second tier capital, which has to do with a lot of revaluation reserves that they have, which they are now going to be converted into possibilities of getting these monies into the system.
Okay.
Getting additional what you call the second tier capital base.
Tier 2.
The tier 2 capital base. Things like long-term loans or convertible loans that they don't have access to when the assets are being liquidated, or if the bank goes into liquidation, they don't have what's it called to the assets. So for me, I think it's great news if they do this, if they're able to increase their capital beyond the 25 billion, which I think is quite small. And another thing is that when you look at the list of banks, even in Africa, a lot of the Nigerian banks don't appear in the top 20, and it's because of capitalization, especially on capitalization, even on profitability. And this I think will boost the sector as a whole and reduce the volume of external debts that we incur as Nigerians.
Yeah, speaking to what the last statement you just made, former CBN Governor Professor Chukwuma Soludo actually mentioned it. Named a few countries that we are still struggling to meet up with: Mauritius, Kenya, Senegal, Ghana, Cape Verde.
And the irony of it is that even in Ghana, a lot of Nigerian banks are playing there.
Yes.
And they are capitalizing.
And these other countries.
Yeah. And they're capitalizing regularly.
Thank you very much, Wadi. We have this one from JP. He says on WhatsApp, good morning, Freshly Pressed. Chetal nailed this. To use the assets of the country with no regards to protocol or costs is effrontery in the highest. Then again,
it's corruption, actually.
Then again, when movies can be banned from airing due to an agency being portrayed by how they are perceived, well, dark days, he says.
All right, thanks, JP. We'll move on to our next story. Shiites won El Rufai over El Zakzaki comment from the New Telegraph. So the Islamic movement in Nigeria, also known as Shiites, yesterday told the Kaduna State Governor, Malam Nasser El Rufai, that the day of reckoning for him and the president was near. There's a reason why. Cheta, please very quickly take us through the story.
Of course, I don't need to rehash the quarrel between the Nigerian states and the Kaduna State government on one side, and then the Islamic movement of Nigeria on the other side. It's quite well known, and the Nigerian state has used all the resources it can bring to bear to suppress these people. The people are still there, they are still talking. However, this statement that was made sounds suspiciously like a threat. The media, Ibrahim Musa, the president of the Media Forum of IMN, has just threatened both the governor of Kaduna and the president of Nigeria. For me, and this is removing all sentiments to moving one sentiment to one side, I would say it's a rational threat. Given that the offense that these guys were accused of, blocking the path of the chief of army staff, is not an offense punishable by the level of violence that was brought to bear. Remember that the immediate aftermath, which was the next day, which shows it was premeditated, 347 people of their people officially admitted what the Nigerian state admitted to were killed the next day for blocking the path of the army chief of staff. The truth of the matter is that these guys have been patient. they have actually proven beyond reasonable doubt that they want to pursue peaceful means. But at every turn, the Nigerian state has used violence to match them. The Nigerian state is sending out a message. And we need to watch this very carefully. Because unlike Boko Haram, that is confined to one far-flung corner of the country, the northeastern quadrant,
Yes.
this is in the heart of the country.
All right. Thank you very much, Cheta.
We have messages on WhatsApp. Mr. C from VI says the use of a presidential jet by the president's daughter speaks to a culture of impunity and lack of institutions.
All right, then we have from Fagbemi Adewale from Nikon says, when Professor Soludo increased bank's capital base to 25 billion, a dollar was less than 100 naira. We all know that what the dollar rate is now, so recapitalization is a welcome development.
Thank you very much. Let's move from the banking talk and all that to the Airspace Management Agency. Now, the Nigerian Airspace Management Authority, NAMA, did not get the waiver it requested from the Nigerian Customs Service, is what they're saying, to clear the Cat 3 navigation aids equipment from the Lagos seaport. We had the story, we discussed this issue last week and talked about how the weather really is not helping planes and aviation industry in Nigeria. Cat 3 instruments are specialized instruments installed at airports to assist pilots to fly at almost zero visibility. But seeing this impasse between the aviation sector and customs, I mean, this one is he said, she said. What do we take from this?
Yeah, I mean, impasse. Impasse is it's a good word, but they've gotten past the situation. The equipment has been cleared because, according to NAMA, they paid over 100 million naira to clear the equipment, which is worth 1 billion naira.
Yeah.
So for me, what it highlights is the inefficiency in inter the agency or departmental liaisons, in this government, right? NAMA is of the opinion, I believe, that they have special waivers granted to them from the government, and I would expect that certain agencies for certain things will have waivers, right, to speed up deployment of critical infrastructure. This critical infrastructure, you talk about visibility recently. The Hamatan, I know that flights between, and I'm sure it must have affected other routes, but flights over the weekend, towards the end of last week actually, flights between Lagos and Ghana, some were cancelled because of low visibility due to Hamatan. But guess what? The Nigerian ones flew. The Nigerian airlines flew. So it made me wonder: is it that the Nigerian pilots or airlines have better skill or ability at flying during Hamatan and low visibility, or were they just not sticking to the rules of safety?
Maybe they just become
as they should.
Maybe they just become dogged or rugged.
As we know, yeah. But in doing that, sometimes it's the pressure of the airline. In doing that, they cut corners. So that's what made me think that the Nigerian ones were able to fly, but the ones that were the Ghanaians said, that visibility was below the required threshold, and they were raising legal issues and said, you know what, we can't fly in these conditions. But the Nigerian ones kept flying and landing. Do you get? Equipment like this in place would have made that probably a non-issue.
Yes.
So it makes it clear why maybe the foreigners refuse to fly, saying that, look, your country doesn't have the equipment required to guide us into land safely in very low visibility.
And this is one reason why we don't have as many airlines as is seen in
expected
other
flying.
parts of the world.
Flying this route beyond the size and quality of the airport, of course. We're missing critical equipment, and then you have two government agencies batting back and forth on something that is as important as this. Equipment as sensitive as is sitting in the port for 6 months, not telling how that may affect it. Right?
Thank you. And then imagine
Have I heard of track on?
All right. As a way of mention, we'll give you this headline from Guardian. States should publish details of governor's life pension payments, SERAP tells court. Fortunately, we can't give you details of that story because of our time, which is fast spent. Don't forget, at 9 o'clock during Lagos Talks 9-1, we'll have more opportunity to have a robust conversation on one of the headline stories from this morning. Well, thanks, our analysts. Thank you, Tunde Okufi at Big Coops on Twitter. Thank you, Cheta at Checkster on Twitter. And thanks a lot, Wade Ahime at Wink Nigeria on Twitter. We're still on Twitter at Smooth981FM. Use the hashtag FreshlyPressed981 to continue the conversation. In a moment, Tega will be joining us on Smooth Breakfast for Locker Room 981. Stay tuned.
Thank you, bro.
See, one
Thank
of the
you.
problems with this intergovernmental things, it happened in power too. You're doing